And in that night, we heard the choir of the empty souls, and none dared answer. The black ships of the Imperium are spoken of in hushed tones, even among those who serve the Emperor without question. These great dark vessels sail the sea of souls, gathering the gifted and the cursed, the psykers who burn too brightly for the mortal mind to bear. Few know what happens aboard these ships. Fewer still return to tell their tale. What you will hear is drawn from the last Vox records of such a ship, the Osurial Promise, a black ship bound for terror that never arrived. The words come from an adept who served aboard her, his voice faint, as if worn thin by fear and the long passage through the warp's silent depths. Listen gently, as these words were never meant for us. They are the fragments of a journey lost to the dark, of a ship that may yet drift between the stars, carrying the weight of souls no longer counted, and prayers that went unanswered. Let us begin. The ship that carried us into the warp was the Osurial Promise. I remember the name being whispered when the orders came through. I remember the way the crew hesitated to board her. The Promise was a black ship, one of many that served the Adeptus Astra Telepathica. It was built not for war or trade, but for something far harder. Its holds were built to carry psykers, souls cursed and gifted in ways that tore at the edges of reason. I, Isareth Khan, was assigned to her with little warning. I had trained for this. I thought I understood what it meant. I did not. When I stepped aboard the Promise, I felt the weight of the ship press against me. The corridors seemed too narrow, the walls too thick. The air carried the smell of burned oil and old incense. The lights flickered as the crew went about their tasks. From the start, there was a silence about the ship that I could not explain. It was not the silence of empty halls. It was the silence of breath held too long. The kind that makes your chest ache and your thoughts race. The Sister of Silence was already aboard, Canoness Solen Vela. She moved through the halls like a shadow. The crew stepped aside when she passed. They lowered their heads. Her armor caught the thin light. Her mask hid all sign of emotion. Her presence made the air seem colder. I avoided her gaze. I think we all did. Our departure was swift. The ship broke from the void dock and slid into the stars without fanfare. No blessing was spoken aloud. No banners waved. The holds were sealed tight. Hundreds of psykers waited within, bound in chains, their eyes hollow. I had seen records of them. Names, numbers, warnings about their gifts. When I thought of them, I thought of danger. But standing there, knowing they were below, I thought only of sorrow. The captain gave no speeches. Voidmaster Druin was a man worn thin by his duties. His voice came over the Vox as we left port. He gave the course. He marked the jump to warp. That was all. His voice was steady, but lacked warmth. He was a man who had seen too much to offer comfort. The jump came without trouble. The Gellerfield thrummed to life. The stars vanished behind the grey fog of the Imperium. The engines gave their steady song. For a time, that sound was a comfort. It reminded us that the ship still held, that the warp remained outside. My tasks kept me busy at first. I checked the warding systems. I logged the state of the holds. I listened to the Vox. I wrote down all I saw. The psykers below stayed quiet, too quiet. I expected cries or prayers. I expected madness. Instead, I found silence. That silence began to weigh on me. The ship felt old, not in the way of rust or decay, old in the way of a place that had carried too many secrets. The corridors curved in ways that made no sense. The bulkheads seemed thicker in some places, as if built to hold back something more than vacuum. I made my way to the shrine on deck 5. I thought perhaps I could find peace there. The candles burned low. The air smelled of wax and oil. The icon of the Emperor looked down at me. The gold of his face seemed duller than I remembered from other shrines. I knelt and tried to pray. The words came slow. My thoughts wandered. I felt watched. The shrine offered no comfort. The sister passed me as I left the shrine. She did not stop. She did not look at me. But the cold that followed her stayed long after she had gone. I walked the halls until my legs grew tired. I listened for the sound of the crew. The ship seemed too quiet. The first day passed, then the second, the third. Time became strange. The hum of the Geller field filled my ears. The silence of the holds filled my thoughts. I began to hear faint sounds on the Vox, not voices at first, just a hiss, a crackle, then, soft as breath, a word. My name. I answered. There was no reply. I checked the Vox lines. I checked the channels. All was as it should be. I told myself it was nothing. A trick of the ears. A fault in the system. But I did not believe it. The crew grew quieter. The captain's orders came slower. His voice seemed tired. The Magos sent his reports. Magos Van kept to the lower decks. His messages spoke of systems holding steady, of power flows that matched the needs of the ship. But there was always a pause in his voice, as if he held back words he did not wish to speak. I dreamed that night. I saw the ship adrift in a sea of black. The stars were gone. The holds were open. The chains hung empty. I woke with a start. The room felt cold. My breath fogged in the air. I dressed and walked. The corridors seemed longer in the dark. The lights flickered more often. The ship's hum seemed softer, as if it too felt the change. I passed the shrine. The candles burned low. The gold of the icon seemed touched by ash. I did not stop. On the fourth day, the sister began to move more through the ship. I saw her pass the shrine. I saw her near the bridge. I saw her near the holds. Always silent, always watching. I checked the holds again. The psykers remained in place, their eyes open, their mouths closed. They stared at nothing. I felt their silence press on me. I turned from them and left. The Vox whispered once more. I heard a prayer I did not know. I heard the name, Amatiel. The voice was soft. I answered again. The voice fell silent. I went to the bridge. The captain stood at the port. His hands gripped the rail. His eyes were fixed on the stars. I spoke his name. He did not answer. I asked if all was well. He said only that the course held. His voice was thin. The warp stayed still. That stillness filled us. The ossuarial promise sailed on, and I waited. The days on the ossuarial promise passed in a haze of dim light and silence. The hum of the Geller field filled the air, steady but cold. The ship drifted through the sea of souls without storm or cry from beyond. That should have been a relief, but it was not. The quiet became the thing we feared most. I kept to my duties as best I could. I walked the halls. I checked the seals on the holds. I listened to the Vox. I made my notes. I told myself this was enough. But with each cycle, it felt like I did less and less. The ship seemed to shrink, yet the space within it felt wider. The corridors stretched longer than I remembered. The rooms seemed deeper. The crew spoke less. Their voices came soft and few. Orders from the bridge came slow. The captain's voice sounded hollow through the Vox. Even the Magos, hidden in his lower decks, sent fewer reports. When he did speak, his voice carried a tightness, as though the words hurt to say. The first sign of change was small, a flicker in the lights near the holds. At first I marked it as nothing. The lights aboard ships often falter. But this flicker lasted longer. It moved along the corridor as if something passed beneath the panels. I stood still and watched. The light steadied. I moved on, though the hair on my neck stood up. That night I tried to sleep. The dreams came fast. I walked the ship in my dream. The corridors stretched on forever. The doors opened onto empty rooms. The holds lay open. Chains swung free. I heard my name spoken in the dark. I woke cold. My breath misted in the air. I rose and walked the halls. The ship felt empty. The hum of the Geller field seemed faint. The lights flickered again, soft and slow. I made my way to the shrine. The candles burned low. Their flames bent as if touched by a breeze, though the air was still. The icon of the Emperor seemed to watch me with hollow eyes. I did not kneel. I did not pray. I turned and left. The Sister of Silence moved through the ship more often now. I saw her pass the shrine. I saw her near the bridge. I saw her near the holds. Her face hidden behind the mask. Her steps made no sound. The cold that followed her stayed long after she passed. On the 5th day, the Magos sent a message through the Vox. His voice came sharp, as if forced out. He spoke of power drains, small at first, hard to trace, but growing. He said the containment fields around the holds showed strain beyond what they should bear. The Geller field still held, but he warned that the systems felt wrong. The captain gave the order to check all systems. His voice broke once as he spoke, just for a moment, but we all heard it. The crew moved with care. No one wanted to speak of what we feared. I checked the wards myself. I touched the panels that showed their glow. I felt the thrum of power beneath, but it felt slow, as if the ship's heart beat too soft. The lights near the holds flickered again, longer this time. The shadows stretched along the walls. I watched for movement. I saw none, but I felt it all the same. I went to the Vox and listened. The whispers came back. They slipped between the orders. They came soft, like breath. I heard my name again. I heard the name Amatiel. I did not answer. The crew gathered in the central shrine when a deckhand failed to report. His name was Druin, or Dreven. I could not recall. The captain spoke a short rite, his voice thin. The sisters stood at the edge, silent and still. The crew's faces were pale, their eyes hollow. The search found nothing, no sign of struggle, no broken seals, no trace of where the man had gone. It was as if he had stepped through a door no one else could see. The shrine seemed darker after. The gold of the icon dulled. The candles burned with weak flame. The air smelled of wax and oil. The sense of being watched grew stronger. The Magos sent another report. He spoke of readings that made no sense. Power drawn from places where no lines ran. Wards that flickered through no fault showed. He spoke of ghosts in the circuits. His voice shook as he spoke. The Geller field throbbed slow. The hum filled the ship, steady but weak. I felt it in my bones. I felt it in my teeth. Sleep fled from me. The dreams came quick each time I closed my eyes. I saw the holds open. I saw the chains broken. I saw faces in the dark. I heard voices call names I did not know. I woke cold ale. I walked again. The halls felt longer. The lights dimmed more often. The ship felt hollow. The shrine burned low. The icon seemed blackened now, as if smoke had touched it. I did not stop. I feared what I might see if I did. The Vox whispered again, a prayer I did not know. I heard my name. I heard Amatiel. The voice faded before I could answer. The sister moved more often near the holds. I saw her on the picked feeds. She stood still before the doors, as if listening. She did not enter. She did not speak. The crew spoke less. Orders came slower. Faces grew fewer. The ship drifted on. The warp stayed still, but that stillness felt worse than any storm. The ship had changed, or perhaps it had always been this way, and we had only just begun to notice. The air felt thicker. The hum of the Geller field, once steady and strong, now pulsed soft and slow, as if the ship itself had grown tired. I walked the halls and felt them stretch longer with each pass. The walls seemed to lean close, as though the ship listened. We gathered in the central shrine when the loss was first spoken. A crewman from the lower decks had vanished. His name, I think, was Tevan, or maybe Taval. His face would not come clear in my mind. That seemed strange. I should have remembered. He had stood the same watch as me. He had shared the same air. Now he was gone. The captain spoke the rites. His voice lacked strength. The Sister of Silence stood at the edge of the gathering. She did not bow. She did not join in prayer. Her stillness weighed more than any words. The search found nothing. No sign of where he had gone. The doors remained sealed. The wards remained strong. The chains in the holds stayed tight. Yet we all felt it. The ship had taken him. The shrine darkened after that. The gold of the icon dulled further. The candles burned lower. The air smelled of old ash. The light seemed to bend around the icon's face, leaving it shadowed even when the flame touched it. I walked the corridors at night. The lights flickered more now. The shadows grew long. The air carried the taste of metal. I felt watched. I felt followed. But I turned and found nothing. The vox whispered still. The name Amatiel came again, the voice clearer than before. It called soft and close, as if just behind me. I answered once. The voice did not return. The Margos spoke through the vox that night. His voice trembled. He said the system showed no fault, yet they failed to act as they should. The power levels shifted without cause. The machine spirits did not answer. He spoke of shadows in the data. His words fell away at the end. He gave no promise of repair. The Geller field throbbed on. Its hum filled the walls. Its beat matched the slow, heavy throb of dread in my chest. I went to the holds. I stood before the sealed doors. I listened. I thought I heard chains shift, but the monitors showed no fault. The psykers remained in place, their faces pale, their mouths closed, their eyes fixed on something I could not see. The sister passed through the decks less often now. When she moved, she kept to the lower levels. Some said she had gone to the psyker holds. Some said they saw her stand before the main ward for hours. None dared follow. The captain no longer spoke to the crew. His orders came slow, passed through others. His face, when seen, grew pale, his eyes hollow. He spent his time on the bridge, watching the stars that no longer matched the charts. The ship felt empty. I passed rooms once full now left bare. I passed stations with no crew. Faces I had known were gone. Their names faded from the logs. No record of when they left. No sign of where they went. I dreamed of the holds. I dreamed of the chains falling free. I dreamed of eyes in the dark, watching, waiting. I woke cold. The room felt tight. The walls pressed close. The shrine gave no comfort. The icon's face cracked at last. A thin line from crown to chin. The candles guttered and died. I did not try to light them. I listened to the vox. I heard prayers in the static. Old prayers, broken by time. Names called that I did not know. I heard my name as well. I did not answer. The Margos sent no more reports. The machines gave no more comfort. The Geller field throbbed soft, as if the heart of the ship had begun to fail. I walked the ship again. The corridors longer now. the lights weaker, the hum of the ship thin and far. I reached the holds. I stood before the doors. I felt the cold of the metal. I heard the chains again, faint, slow, like breath drawn in the dark. I turned from the doors. I walked back. The ship felt hollow. The ship felt lost. I passed the shrine. The icon had fallen. The gold flaked to dust. The candles cold. The air thick. I returned to my station. I listened. The Vox stayed silent. The hum of the ship the only sound. The ossuarial promise sailed on. The warp stayed still. That stillness louder than any storm. The crew kept to shadows, faces thin, eyes wide, words few. We waited for something we could not name, and the ship waited with us. The days on the ossuarial promise began to blend together. The ship drifted on, deeper into the warp's silent sea. The hum of the Geller field filled the halls, but it no longer gave comfort. That sound had become like a slow breath, shallow and weak. The shrine on deck 5 grew dark. The gold of the Emperor's icon had dulled until it seemed to drink in what little light the candles gave. The candles burned low, their flames thin and pale. I no longer saw crew stop there. The space felt cold even when the candles burned. The air near it seemed heavy, as if the weight of the dark pressed down upon it. I walked past it often. Each time, I thought of stopping. Each time, I kept walking. I did not want to look at the icon's face for too long. I feared what I might see in those empty eyes. The captain spoke less and less. His orders came late, passed through the few who remained on the bridge. His voice, when heard, sounded hollow. I had once thought of him as a man of strength, one who had carried out his duty for many years. Now, I saw a man who drifted as much as the ship did. He watched the stars beyond the ports. He stared at charts that no longer matched the heavens outside. I passed him once in the upper corridor. His eyes did not see me. His mouth moved as if in prayer, but no sound came. I stopped, unsure if I should speak. He walked past without notice. His coat hung loose, his boots scuffed and worn. The Sister of Silence kept to the lower decks. I had not seen her face to face in some time. I heard stories from the few who still walked those halls. They said she stood before the sealed doors of the holds. They said she stood there for hours, as if waiting for something, or listening to a voice only she could hear. I began to spend my nights walking the ship. Sleep no longer came easy. When I closed my eyes, I dreamed of the holds. I saw the chains swing free. I saw faces in the dark. I heard my name spoken, soft and close. I woke cold each time, the taste of ash on my tongue. The crew grew few. Stations once manned now stood empty. Faces once familiar no longer crossed my path. I stopped asking where they had gone. I feared the answer. The Margos no longer sent his reports. The last time I heard his voice, it had cracked like dry wood. He spoke of readings that made no sense. Power drawn from places where no lines ran. Shadows that flickered across data screens and then vanished without trace. He warned that the machine spirits had grown silent. His final words were a whisper. He said the ship had changed. The Geller field throbbed on, but its hum felt faint. I pressed my hand to the walls at times. I felt the pulse of the ship, slow and weak. The steady rhythm that had once filled the halls now felt like a heartbeat, fading with each cycle. I went again to the shrine. I do not know why. I stood before the icon. The gold had blackened. The face of the Emperor seemed cracked, the lines like veins of ash spreading across the surface. The candles burned no more. The air smelled of cold wax and dust. I felt no peace there, only the weight of unseen eyes. I did not kneel. I did not speak. I turned and left. The sound of my steps echoed down the empty hall. The Vox stayed silent most days. When it broke the silence, it did so with soft static. Sometimes a voice would slip through, a prayer I did not know, a name I could not place. Once I heard my own name spoken, clear and close. I did not answer. The warp stayed still. The stillness itself had become the thing we feared. A storm we could see would have been a mercy. The silence pressed against us, thick and heavy, as if waiting for something none of us could name. I checked the holds, as I had done so many times before. The doors remained sealed. The chains remained tight. The psykers within sat silent. Their eyes stared at nothing. Their mouths did not move. Their faces had grown thin, their skin pale as bone. I watched for a time. I could not say what I waited for. I turned and left when the weight of their gaze became too much to bear. I passed the shrine again on my way back. The icon had crumbled further. A piece of the gold had fallen to the floor. I stepped around it. I did not look back. The captain no longer answered calls. His station on the bridge stood empty when I passed the viewports. His coat hung from the chair. The ports showed stars that no longer seemed right. Shapes that should not have been there. Shadows that moved when they should have stayed still. I no longer kept count of the days. Time had lost meaning on the ship. We moved through the warp, but it felt as though we no longer moved at all. The crew who remained kept to the dark corners, their eyes hollow, their words few. The sister was seen no more. Some said she had gone beyond the sealed doors. Some said they saw her walking the holds. Some said she had stepped into the void itself, lost to the dark that waited beyond the ship's skin. The hum of the Gellerfield grew faint. The lights flickered more often. The air felt thick, as if the ship itself struggled to breathe. I listened to the Vox, hoping for some sound. The static filled my ears. At times I thought I heard the name Amatiel, soft as a sigh. The ship drifted on. The stillness of the warp around us felt complete. The kind of silence that waits at the edge of a storm. The kind of silence that makes you fear the sound that will break it. The ossuarial promise sailed on, and we drifted with her, lost and waiting. The warp stayed still around the ossuarial promise, but that stillness had turned cruel. Where once its tempests had roared against the Geller field in endless rage, now there was only silence. A silence that felt worse, as if the storm had drawn back not in defeat, but in preparation. The hum of the Geller field, once a steady song in our bones, had softened to little more than a faint throb. When I pressed my hand to the walls, I could feel it, slow and weak, like the last breath of a dying man. I listened to that hum as one might listen to the heartbeat of a loved one slipping into death, hoping for strength where there was none. The stars beyond the ports no longer seemed right. I watched them when I could bear it, hoping to see some shape or pattern I knew. Instead, they looked broken. Some glowed with a strange red light that pulsed like blood beneath torn skin. Others blinked as though fighting to stay alight, their glows stuttering in defiance of the dark. Some no longer shone at all, their places marked by voids deeper than the surrounding black. I stopped looking after a time. The stars no longer gave hope. They no longer even gave direction. They had become part of the enemy. The captain no longer answered calls. His voice, once steady over the Vox, had faded to memory. His station on the bridge grew empty, though at times I thought I saw the shape of him still there, seated in the great chair, one hand upon the console. But when I entered, there was only the empty chair, the coat draped across it, as if waiting for him to return. The few crew who remained there spoke in hushed tones, their faces pale and thin, their eyes hollow, their gazes lost somewhere beyond the walls of the ship. When I walked the upper decks, I passed the bridge and saw them at their stations, working motions that no longer served purpose. I never disturbed them. I feared that if I did, I might see what lay beneath their hollow eyes. The Sister of Silence had not been seen in days. Some whispered that she had gone below, past the doors of the holds, drawn by the psykers or by what watched them. Some said they saw her walking the dark corridors at night, her silent steps unmarked, her pale mask turned to watch the watchers. Others claimed she had stepped into the void, lost forever beyond the skin of the ship. No one truly knew. Her absence weighed heavier than her presence ever had. There had been comfort in her silence, a barrier between us and the thing we dared not name. Now even that barrier was gone. The Margos sent no more reports. His voice had been the last to carry through the Vox with any weight, and now even that had fallen silent. The last of his messages spoke of systems stable, readings clean, no more anomalies to chart. But his voice had trembled as he spoke those words, and when the Vox cut out, it had not returned. I thought of seeking him out. I thought of walking the length of the ship to his sanctum and knocking upon the sealed door. But my steps never took me there. Some part of me feared what I might find, that the door would open to empty space, or to a room filled with only the stillness of abandoned machine prayers. The holds remained sealed. The chains showed no sign of break or strain. The wards still glowed, but their light seemed thinner, stretched as if across a greater distance. The psykers sat as they had since we left port, silent and unmoving. Their eyes wide, their faces hollow. I watched them through the monitors, waiting for some sign, some flicker of change, but they did not move. They did not speak. They stared, always stared, and I felt that what they saw lay not within the hold, but beyond, where no eyes should ever look. I walked the ship each night. The halls grew longer. The shadows stretched deeper, as if the walls themselves had forgotten where they ended. The lights flickered more often, their glow thin and sickly. The air smelled of oil and old smoke, the scent of things long neglected. I passed rooms that once held crew and found them empty, their doors ajar, their bunks unmade as if the crew had risen in haste, never to return. I listened for voices, for the sounds of life. I heard only the creak of bulkheads and the soft sigh of the ship as it drifted on. The shrine on deck 5 had fallen dark. The gold of the icon had blackened. The face of the Emperor cracked and faded. The candles had burned out. No one tried to relight them. The air near the shrine felt thick, heavy, like water that would not let you breathe. I paused there once, thinking to offer a prayer, but no words came. My voice failed me, and I walked on, leaving the shrine to its ruin. The Vox whispered still, not often, but enough to keep my ears strained for the sound. I heard prayers I did not know, old words broken by time, names called soft as breath. Sometimes I heard my own name. Sometimes I heard the name Amatiel. I did not answer. I learned not to listen too closely. I learned to let the static pass like wind over stone. The Geller field seemed to steady. The hum grew a little stronger. The throb in the walls matched the slow beat of my own heart. For a moment, I thought this might bring relief, but the quiet beyond grew deeper, heavier. The warp felt as if it held its breath, as if all the rage and hunger of that sea had drawn back and waited. And I knew that when it exhaled again, it would come with a force we could not withstand. Margos Van's last message had spoken of clean data. No more shadows in the readings, no more strange flows of power. He said the systems worked as they should, but his voice broke as he spoke the words. He did not sound relieved. He sounded lost, as though the absence of anomaly had left him without purpose, as though the strangeness had been all that kept him anchored. And now, with that gone, he drifted, as we all did. The ship's course vanished from the screens. The navigational data erased without reason. The consoles showed no path, no mark of where we had been or where we might go. The stars beyond the port gave no guide. We drifted, and we with it. The ossuarial promise had become a coffin without destination, a tomb set adrift on a sea that would never end. I heard the name Amatiel again, this time clear as speech. The voice came from the air beside me, soft and cold, a breath against my ear. I turned, but no one stood there. The air felt heavy, the chill deep. The voice did not speak again, but the memory of it stayed, as real as any hand upon my shoulder. I returned to the holds. The doors remained closed, the chains unbroken. The wards still glowed, their light fragile but unbroken. I stood before the doors and listened. I heard the faint sound of chains falling. When I checked the monitors, all seemed as before. But I no longer trusted what the monitors showed. I no longer trusted what my eyes saw. The crew kept to the shadows, their faces drawn thin, their steps slow and quiet. We no longer spoke of the sister, or the captain, or the Margos. Their names had become like dust, swept away by the slow wind of the ship's passing. We lived in ritual now, in the motions of duty that no longer served purpose. We worked to stave off the end, though we knew it would come. I dreamed often. I dreamed of the ship adrift in a void without stars. I dreamed of the holds open, the chains broken. I saw faces in the dark, watching, waiting. I heard voices call names I did not know. I woke cold, my breath misting in the air. The chill stayed with me long after I rose. I passed the shrine once more. The icon had crumbled further. The gold flaked away, leaving only black stone beneath. The air near it seemed colder than anywhere else on the ship. I felt the weight of unseen eyes upon me. I did not stop. I did not kneel. The shrine had nothing left to offer. I walked the ship again. The lights flickered more often. The hum of the Geller field filled the walls, but gave no comfort. The air smelled of cold metal, of dust, of things left too long in the dark. The ship drifted on, lost in the silent sea of the warp. The quiet outside pressed harder than any storm. The crew who remained kept to what small duties they could. Most kept to the dark, waiting. And so did I. There was nothing else left to do, and the dark waited with us, patient, unblinking, certain. The ossuarial promise drifted deeper into the dark. The stars outside the ports faded until there was nothing left to see. No light, no landmark. Only the black remained. I watched them vanish one by one, those distant points that once gave meaning to our course, and felt something within me hollow with their passing. The ship's hum still filled the air, but it no longer seemed steady. It came in soft waves, like breath drawn slow and weak, like a voice trying to speak through exhaustion and failing. The Geller field still worked. I could sense its barrier holding fast at the edge of our world, but it felt no longer like a shield. It felt like the last effort of a dying man, a breath drawn not for life, but for fear of letting go. I no longer knew how many days had passed. I had marked them once, with diligence and duty, but those records grew thin, scattered, lost to corrupted logs and broken screens. The systems that tracked time showed only static now, as if even the machine spirit no longer saw purpose in counting the moments. The Vox stayed silent most of the time, though now and then it would crackle, a sound like breath drawn close to the receiver, or the soft murmur of a prayer too broken to understand. I stopped answering. The names I heard whispered through the static were not my own. and yet they seemed to call to me all the same, as if daring me to speak, to break the silence that hung like a weight upon us. I walked the halls, as I always had done. The duty remained, even as the purpose faded. The crew I passed were few. Their eyes were hollow, their steps slow. Many did not look at me. Some did not seem to see me at all. I wondered if they saw anything. The ship felt empty, though I knew it was not. The ossuarial promise carried more than the living now. The psykers in the holds remained. The chains held. The seals glowed faint, their light weaker with each cycle. But I felt as if the ship bore more than them, as if the void beyond had seeped in through cracks too small to see, filling the spaces between, pressing close against our thoughts. The captain was gone. His coat still hung from the chair on the bridge, draped as if he might return at any moment to take his place. His voice no longer came over the vox. His eyes no longer stared at the broken stars. I had once found solace in his presence, a quiet strength. That comfort had fled with him. The bridge crew that remained kept to their stations, hands moving through motions long stripped of meaning. Their voices were few. The charts had long since lost all purpose. The stars gave no guide. We had no path. We were adrift, and we no longer pretended otherwise. The Sister of Silence had vanished as well. No one spoke of her. No one dared. Her presence had been a bastion, a quiet ward against what we could not name. Now it was an absence, heavier than words could bear. Some said she had gone beyond the sealed doors of the holds. Some whispered she had walked into the void itself, seeking in the cold embrace of space what could not be found aboard. And some said she moved unseen still, her steps silent as her vow, watching, waiting. I did not know which tale to believe. I did not wish to know. The truth would offer no solace. I kept near the vox for a time, a foolish hope, but one I clung to. I waited for some sound, some word, that would tell me what to do, where to go. But the vox gave only the soft crackle of static. The names called from the dark. The prayers whispered through the noise, fragmented and hollow. I stopped hoping. I stopped listening. At last, I went down to the lower decks. I felt drawn there, though every step warned me against it. The lights flickered more as I descended, their glow fighting the dark and losing. The air smelled of oil and cold metal, a tang of something older beneath it, like the breath of a tomb long sealed. The hum of the ship seemed far away now. The walls felt close, the corridors narrow, as if the ossuarial promise herself held her breath, unwilling to disturb what lay below. I reached the doors of the holds. The seals glowed faint, but steady. The chains showed no sign of strain. I placed my hand against the door, and the metal felt cold, colder than it should have, a cold that bit deeper than steel, that seemed to seep through skin and bone and into thought. I stood there for a long time, listening. I thought I heard the sound of chains falling, the soft scrape of links across the deck, the sigh of tension released. But when I checked the monitors, all was as it had been. The images flickered, but showed nothing new. I began to wonder if the monitors reflected truth, or only what I wished to see. I opened the outer hatch and stepped inside. The air in the hold felt thick, as if I had stepped beneath the surface of a still black sea. The space seemed larger than it should have. The rows of chained psykers stretched into the dark, their forms swallowed by shadow. Their faces were pale, their eyes wide, their mouths closed. They did not move. They did not speak. But I felt their gaze, though their eyes never turned. I felt it press against my thoughts, cold and heavy. a weight that grew with every step I took. I walked between them, my steps slow, my breath loud in the stillness. I kept my eyes down. I feared to meet their stare. The hum of the Geller field seemed softer here, as if the power that kept the warp at bay grew weary beneath their presence. The silence was deeper. It filled the space, pushing against the sound of my footfalls, swallowing them before they could echo. At the far end of the hold, I found what I had feared. The sister's helm lay at the base of the main ward, her mask beside it. There was no sign of her, no mark of struggle, no trace of where she had gone. Only the empty helm, the empty mask, and the sense that she had stepped beyond what any of us could follow. I knelt there, my hand hovering over the cold steel of her mask, unable to touch it. I thought of prayers, but none came. I thought of words, but the silence mocked them. I stood there for a long time. I did not know what choice remained. The holds were sealed, the chains held, the wards glowed, yet I felt as though nothing now stood between the ship and what waited beyond. The ossuarial promise had grown thin, like ice upon a dark sea. We moved not upon a course, but upon the edge of what could not be endured. I turned at last and walked back. The psykers did not move. The chains lay still, yet their gaze followed. I felt it like a breath at the nape of my neck. The cold of the space wrapped close, clinging to me as I climbed back through the hatch, as I sealed it behind me. The seals glowed faint, their light too pale to grant comfort. The bridge was empty when I returned. The chair stood as I had left it. The coat still hung across the back. The screens showed static and broken stars. The hum of the ship filled the air, faint and slow. The shapes beyond the ports seemed nearer now. I could see no detail, but I felt their gaze, as I had felt the psykers. Watching, waiting. I tried to call to the crew. No one answered. I tried to call to the Margos. The Vox stayed silent. The line filled with static, the sound of breath drawn too close, of names called too soft to understand. I listened, though I knew no voice would come. I sat at the console for a time. I stared at the screens. I watched the static dance. I watched the shapes beyond the ports shift, as if drawing ever nearer, or perhaps as if I had drawn closer to them. I waited for a sign, but no sign came. The ship drifted on. The warp stayed still. The silence of that sea pressed close, like a shroud drawn tight. The kind of silence that waits for the last word to be spoken, the last breath to be drawn. The ossuarial promise sails on. The charts mean nothing. The stars give no guide. I wait with her, unsure if I have chosen, or if the ship has chosen for me. The dark waits also, and it will not wait forever. The halls of the ossuarial promise felt longer now. Each step echoed through the empty decks, a hollow sound that answered itself and nothing more. I walked them still, though I had forgotten when last I passed this way. The walls bore new marks, scratches too shallow for a blade, too precise for accident. Symbols, perhaps. I dared not look too long. The lights flickered with no pattern I could mark. Some went out and did not return. Others burned too bright, casting long shadows that stretched into the dark and merged with it. I watched the shadows move, though nothing should have cast them. The hum of the Geller field still filled the air, but softer than before, like a voice grown tired, like breath that came slow and shallow. There had been a rhythm once, a steady beat beneath the deck plates that spoke of protection, of safety. That rhythm now faltered. There were moments I could not hear it at all, and in those moments I felt the ship exposed, bare before the storm beyond. I kept to my rounds, though I no longer knew why. The crew had vanished one by one. The faces I once passed now lived only in memory. I tried to remember their names, their voices, but the silence of the ossuarial promise smothered those recollections. The captain had gone, his coat still hanging where he had left it beside the command chair. The Sister of Silence had vanished, her mask left behind on the chapel altar. The magos no longer sent word, no longer hummed through the vox with reports of engine health and logic-spun predictions. The few who remained kept to corners, moving as ghosts might. Or perhaps they too were gone, and I simply imagined their passing, a kindness I offered myself to stave off the truth. The vox stayed quiet most hours. At times it cracked with static, as if trying to speak. I listened, hoping for a voice I might know, but none came. The names whispered through the noise were not mine. The prayers broken by time brought no comfort. Once, a fragment of a hymn reached me, a familiar cadence, but twisted, the words lost to some corruption of signal or source. I answered it, softly, hoping to complete the verse, but the line fell into static, as though my voice drove it back into silence. I walked the bridge. The chair still stood empty, the coat still hung where the captain had left it, untouched by the passage of days or the gathering of dust. The ports showed a sea of black, broken by stars that no longer shone as they should. Shapes drifted among them, too distant to know, too close to forget. They seemed to draw nearer, not by motion, but by some slow, inevitable pull that no chart could plot. I watched them as a man watches the tide, knowing it will come for him in time. The shrine on deck 5 had fallen dark. The gold of the icon flaked to dust. The stone beneath cracked. The candles had long burned out, their wax run in rivulets down the altar's side. The air near it felt cold, thick as if the dark gathered there, waiting. I once knelt there, seeking solace. Now I passed without pausing, unwilling to feel that cold seep into my bones. The prayers offered there had gone unanswered too long. Even the echo of faith had fled that place. I went to the holds once more. The doors remained sealed. The chains held. The wards glowed faint and thin. The runes cracked at their edges, as if the weight of the void pressed against them. The psykers within sat as they had since we left port, their eyes wide, their mouths closed, their bodies still. But I felt as if something in them had changed. Or perhaps it was only me, seeing now what I had refused to see before. The way their forms seemed less flesh and more shadow. The way their presence thickened the air with each passing cycle. I stood before the doors and listened. I heard the soft sound of chains falling. When I checked the monitors, nothing had moved. The screens showed what they always showed. Still forms, sealed holds, unbroken chains. But I no longer trusted what I saw. The screens lied, or I had forgotten how to read them. I thought of opening the doors, ending the doubt. My hand hovered over the controls, trembling. I did not press them. The ship drifted on. The charts had long since lost meaning. The stars beyond gave no guide. The warp stayed still, but that stillness felt like a trap that had closed around us. I felt it in my bones, in the slowing throb of the Geller field, in the way the ossuarial promise no longer answered the helm's touch. We moved because we must, not because we chose. I kept my logs, though I no longer knew for whom. My voice sounded thin in the quiet. I spoke because silence frightened me more. I spoke to fill the space, left by voices now gone. I spoke to remind myself I still lived. The words became ritual. I no longer listened to what I said. I spoke of systems past, of course corrections, of minor faults repaired, lies, all of it. We passed no systems. The helm answered no touch. No fault could be repaired, for no fault could be found. The ossuarial promise was sound. It was we who were broken. I walked the halls until my legs grew weak. I passed rooms once filled with sound and found them empty. I passed stations once manned and found them bare. The hum of the ship seemed far away. The lights dimmed with each cycle. I began to mark the walls, not in hope of mapping my path, but so that I might know I had passed this way before. The marks blurred, the walls shifted, or so it seemed. I no longer trusted the ship's shape. The Geller field still worked. I felt its throb through the deck, but that throb slowed, as if the ship's heart had grown tired. The sound of my own breath grew loud in my ears. The beat of my heart filled the spaces between. In those beats, I heard other sounds, the scrape of unseen feet, the whisper of voices behind the bulkheads, the faint rattle of chains too distant to see. I stopped to listen. The sounds ceased. I moved on, and they returned. I dreamed often. I dreamed of the ship adrift in a sea without stars. I dreamed of the holds open, the chains broken, the faces of the psykers turned toward me, their eyes hollow, their mouths wide, but no sound came. I dreamed of the sister, walking the dark, her mask gone, her face lost to shadow. I dreamed of the captain at the port, his eyes empty, his hands reaching for a light that would not come. I dreamed of the shapes beyond the hull, pressing closer, watching, waiting. I woke cold each time, the air thick, my breath misting in the dark. The Vox spoke once more, a name I did not know, a prayer I could not place. I did not answer. The voice faded into the static. I wondered if it had ever truly spoken at all. The shrine fell to ruin at last. The icon crumbled to dust. The candles lay cold and broken. The air near it felt colder than the void. I passed it without pause. There was no light left to find there. I thought of lighting a new candle, but my hands shook too much. The match fell, unstruck. I stood at the bridge one last time. I looked through the ports. The black beyond pressed close. The shapes among the stars watched in silence. I felt their gaze as I had felt the gaze of the psykers, cold and heavy. I thought to send a distress call, but to whom? We had long since passed beyond reach. Even the Emperor's light seemed faint and far. I sat at the console. I spoke my last log. I told of the ship. I told of the crew. I told of the silence that had claimed us. I spoke until my voice grew weak. I spoke until the words no longer came. I listened for an answer. Only static came. The ossuarial promise drifts still. The ship remains whole but empty. The crew list sends no names. The prayers have ended. The light has failed. The shapes beyond the hull draw closer. We are lost, and the dark waits.